Good morning, Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tony from McLaren St. Luke's Family Medicine, and as we do the third Wednesday of each month, give a talk on a different medical topic. Today we have Dr. Alex Altman that's going to talk about advanced directives. Sometimes we hear this referred to as advanced care planning, which is a little bit more in depth because advanced care planning talks about advanced directives, but sometimes it also talks about your code status. Do you want to be a do not resuscitate? Some people even go a little bit further into talking about their, potential for organ donation and things like that. But today we're really just going to focus on advanced directives. So that's basically two documents, a living will and power of attorney that Dr. Altman is going to talk a little bit more about. So I picked this topic for the beginning of the year because it's a good time to as our resolution, if we don't have these in place, to get them in place. But if we already have them in place, to pull them out, take a look at them, see, are those documents truly what my healthcare wishes still are? Are these people that I designated as my power of attorney for healthcare, the people that I still want them to be so? There's a lot of good information here, so I'll turn it over to him and then we'll stick around in case you have any personal questions.
Thanks for the introduction, Tony, and thank you for having us today. There is a handout that you guys have here, and I think it's shared on our screen. I will be referencing it a little bit. There's a lot of words. I'm not going to read from it word for word, but I just wanted to put enough on here so that you can reference it back if you ever want to look at it and get more information. And so advanced directives and, kind of thinking or planning for end of life isn't always the most fun thing to talk about, but it is important. And so that, as Tony mentioned, that's why we're here today. So first, what are advanced directives? They're written forms, and I'm going to get into the two specific types of advanced directives that we have here in the state of Ohio. But essentially, it lets your family, your physicians, hospital staff, the emergency room, anybody that's taking care of you, know what you would want in the event that you're unable to do so. And a good example is if you're in a car accident, for example, and you need to be brought by EMS to the hospital, and let's say that you're unconscious and just not able to tell those in the emergency room what you want done. That's where your advanced directives would come in. And that's important to note. Anything we talk about here today, these advanced directives only come into place when you're unable to communicate what you want done. And that's the only time. Otherwise, if you're able to state your wishes, that's when it happens. So why should you have them? Well, many people wait too long to do them. It's not uncommon in the healthcare world that we'll see somebody in the hospital who's unable to make those decisions for themselves. And they never had that conversation with their family or their loved ones or their physician. And it puts families in a little bit of a stressful situation sometimes because they have to make decisions for their loved ones without knowing what their loved one would have wanted to be done anyway. And a good example, I think, or a good analogy, not related to healthcare, is let's say one of you bring your car to the mechanic. You tell the mechanic, you know what, I don't really know what needs done with it, but why don't you just take a look, call me when you're done looking at it, tell me what you want done, or tell me what you think needs done with it. And they call the house and your spouse answers. And the mechanic says, hey, I think it needs this, 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 and this, and this, whatever. And your spouse says, okay, just go ahead and do it all. No problem. And then you and your spouse talk 30 minutes later and they're like, oh, you know what? The mechanic called, I told them to do it all. And you say, I didn't want them to do all that. I wanted to talk to them myself. Well, there would have been no way for your spouse to know that unless you guys had talked about it. So maybe just a silly example, but it does relate to healthcare too. Without talking about it, and specifically with these advanced directives, writing down your wishes, how would people know? And is there an age that's too young, or is there a particular time that you should have them filled out? No, any adult over the age of 18, that's when it's the right time. I myself have some advanced directives written down. It's a good thing to do for anybody at any age, because you never know when you're going to need them. So just getting into the specifics, Tony mentioned it and I mentioned it. There's two advanced directives that we like to talk about. The first one, and they're listed on your form here, is durable power of attorney for healthcare. This is not the same thing as power of attorney for financial reasons. Sometimes we have people that can sign bank documents and those types of things. That's not the same thing. This is the name of a person that you trust to make medical decisions for yourself in the event that you're unable to do so. There is in the state of Ohio kind of a typical order: spouse, children, siblings, etc. But if you designate who specifically you want, there's no question about it. You have said who you want to make those decisions for you, and it's written down. And this can change, by the way. Some people have advanced directives that they wrote 25, 30 years ago. That can change. It's a good idea, like Tony mentioned, to pull those out and take a look at it every once in a while. Make sure that person that you in the past have said that you trust to make those decisions, that they're still the person to do so. And the other one is a living will. So this specifies specific treatments under specific circumstances that you would want done to you. And an example that I like to use here, and let's say that you know, in a car accident or whatever happens, some sort of medical event, and you're placed in a ventilator, on a ventilator. There's a breathing tube that helps you breathe, and you're kept alive through life support in an ICU. There may be an example where you say, you know what, I would be okay being on a ventilator for a week. But if there's no reasonable chance medically that I would make it out of this medically induced coma on my own, I don't want to be kept alive artificially anymore. Those specific instances can be written down in this living will. I do have a copy here with me today, and I also have some resources where you can actually find a copy of this paperwork. But it's just worth going through all the questions and all the different things that it asks you, and even in this case, this is what I would want, etc. Okay. I'm going to go to the back side of the handout if anybody's following along. So where can you find these forms? There are several places you can find these forms. Your doctor's office should have them. Lawyers will have them. Health departments, I have the health department number here for Lucas and Wood County. You can find them there. Area Office on Aging should be able to have them. So here, I think even in this building, I think you can probably get those forms. And there's even a website that I have listed as well too. So if you don't have them filled out, or if you want to update them, what do you do with them when you get them? Well, you can fill them out yourself. I would probably recommend having somebody, a loved one that you trust, help you through them. They are pretty simple to fill out, but there are a lot of blanks and a lot of different places where you put different check marks and things like that. So it's probably worth having somebody look at it with you, somebody that you trust, of course. And then you need to have them signed. You need to have them signed by two witnesses. There's two options, either two witnesses that are not related to you through blood, marriage, or adoption. So they cannot be a family member, possibly a friend, somebody that you trust, or they can be notarized by a notary public when you have, at a bank or something similar. It's important to note you do not need a lawyer to fill out these forms. You do not need to pay anybody any money to fill these out. Like you would maybe a financial will or estate planning will. That's not the case with these. So not that you could not use the services of a lawyer if that were to be your wishes, but it's important to know that that's not something that's required. Something else I should know, when you have these forms filled out, make sure that you make copies of them and you give them to people that that are taking care of you in a healthcare arena. So your physician's office, hospitals that maybe you go to sometime. Give a copy to loved ones. I also recommend that you keep a copy at your house that's readily accessible. All of us have our secret nooks and crannies where we keep all our documents. But if nobody knows where those secret nooks and crannies are, it's not very helpful when you can't tell somebody where it's at. So make sure that people know where those forms are. You can change your mind at any time. I've alluded to this a couple of times, but it doesn't matter if 2 weeks ago you filled out forms and something has changed in your life. Maybe your wishes have changed, or maybe the person that you trust to make those decisions for yourself has changed. You can change these at any time. And anytime you have a new copy, those supersede the previous copy. Oh,
This is that directive.
it is.
There you go.
It is, yep. There's a hand up for you. So just one other thing I would mention too is it's important to have these conversations with your physician. Usually your physician is somebody who's been with you for a long time, not always the case, but they've known you for a long time. They know your wishes, they know your beliefs. And if you have those conversations with that person ahead of time, years ahead of time, when it comes to some of those end of life planning decisions, your physician can also be an advocate for you too. So there's one other thing I just wanted to mention, and I do have this form here too. If anybody, we can make copies of these if anybody wants it, is code status. Now, people have probably heard the term code status, so it's slightly different than these advanced directives, and I just wanted to mention it briefly so you understand a little bit what the difference is. A code status is an order that's signed by a physician, and usually it's something that's talked about ahead of time with your physician. This comes into play whether you're able to make healthcare decisions for yourself or not. And I have this written exactly down here for you so you can look at it. But for example, a full code, if your heart were to stop or you were to stop breathing, the healthcare professionals taking care of you would do everything in their power to bring you back. They would do compressions, they would give you shocks, they would give you medications to the heart to try to get it pumping again. And it's possible you may be a full code, meaning if you have some sort of event, you want everybody to do everything they can at that time to bring you back. But after that happens, and if you're unable to make decisions for yourself, that's when all this paperwork comes into play. So you can be a full code, and then also in your living will have a lot of stipulations about, I don't want to be kept on life support for a long time, all those types of things. So kind of important to talk about. And there's a couple of different types of do not resuscitate as well. I won't go into too many of the details there. But essentially there is an option where you would have normal health care under normal circumstances. You would be treated for any sort of medical condition you have. There's really no difference between that and a full code up until the time if your heart were to stop. And at that time, if it would be your wish that you would not want CPR done, those types of things, then it would not be done. And if you have elected that would be your time to go. So just important to have with all of this, that conversation with your physicians and your loved ones ahead of time. Just to summarize, in the event that something happens, you just want to make sure that your wishes are known. So that was a lot of me talking. And again, I said a lot of words here, but does anybody have any questions about any of this?
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, if you want to make additions or corrections, you have to have that notarized and everything.
Yes.
Because ours is really, really basically what probably want more specific things.
That's a good question. So I can tell you that advanced directives, excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. Advanced directives are now in their 8th edition. When the advanced directives first came out in 1990, anybody that filled out their advanced directives, they all said the same thing. Then they got smart and said, well, Dr. Altman might want something different than I want, than what you might want. So now there's boxes on there that say, hey, I only want to be on a ventilator for 10 days, but if I need to be on something permanent, take me off of it. Or I'm willing to do dialysis for a very short period of time because there's a chance that it might jumpstart my kidneys and they'll start working again. But if I have to be on dialysis for years, I don't want it. These are little things that you can write in there. So like the document that he has, it shows a little box, you can put that stuff in, and whatever document you currently complete is going to supersede or take the place of the last one. So it's good to, if you had yours done 15, 20 years ago, your thought process, your feelings about certain things with your current age and health condition might have changed, and you want to update it, and that's perfectly fine. And like I said, we can do that free of charge. My take-home message is have the conversation with the person that you want to be your power of attorney for healthcare, and have them look at you in the eye and say, yes, I'm willing to follow your wishes. Because I was the youngest of 4 kids, and my mom made me the power of attorney for healthcare because, well, my sister was handicapped, but my 2 brothers would have kept my mom alive at all costs because we don't want to let mom go. But she knew that I'd be willing to follow her wishes. The other thing that concerns me is when somebody says, my kids know what I want, no problem. But when you have 2 kids and one lives in town and truly knows you and knows what you want, and the other one's been living in California for a few years, and now you're very sick in the terminal condition, and the one in town says, yeah, we're just going to keep mom comfortable until she passes, and the other one comes in from California and wants to make up for lost time. I promise you, in 30+ years of doing healthcare, I've seen it multiple times. So unless you put something in writing, in the state of Ohio, if you don't have advanced directives in place, there's a pecking order of who's going to make those decisions. And some people think, well, it's my oldest child. It's not that. It's the majority of adult children based on, where we go in the pecking order. So people assume too much. People are ill-informed, and you don't know what you don't know. The other thing is make copies. Once you do this, give a copy to your primary care physician. If you go to the ER, make sure you have a copy with them and, you know, the home care agency or whatever. Don't do what my mom did, which is every important document she ever owned, she put in the safety deposit box at the bank. And we all know that only people who are on that card get access to that, so it's an issue. It should be readily available, but hopefully these are some things that help kind of clear up things, but that's a very big one.
If it just says DNR, I don't think we've got this full code stuff on there. What will happen?
You said if it says full code,
No, it doesn't say, I don't think it says any of those. It just says DNR.
If you've not had a conversation with your physician and had a form signed, you're a full code.
Okay.
It's that plain and simple.
Okay. So it's really not, it's like having nothing.
Right.
Oh,
and there are two different, if you have had that, you said your code status is the DNR, there are two types of DNR. Probably maybe it just wasn't specified at that time, which it was, or which of the two was, but there are two different types. And I just wanted to put those two there for you so that you know there is a difference. And I guess I can't tell you which one of those it is without seeing the paperwork.
Yes, the follow-up to that is if you're at a point in your life of where something should happen and you don't want a lot of aggressive care, make sure you had that conversation with your primary care physician so that he or she can document things appropriately and get the proper document signed and be able to give you a copy. So in the event that you have to call 911 or family calls 911, the emergency response team knows how to properly handle things and keeping you comfortable moving forward.
So that little vial of life or whatever it is, will that?
You talk about like nitroglycerin or?
No, they have that thing with it, that you put in your refrigerator.
Oh, yeah. They should be, I always say, the best things that you can have on your refrigerator is a copy of your information, your meds, your allergies, your med history, a copy of your advanced directives, and a copy of this form, which is the do not resuscitate, if indeed you've had a conversation with your physician and he or she has signed it.
So this form you do with your physician?
It must be signed by a physician or practitioner, somebody like that. Otherwise, you're considered a full, the emergency response team, the ER, any other healthcare team is gonna do everything aggressively to,
So if you put it on the, give it to the hospital, will it automatically go to the ER, or will it get lost?
they'll scan it into the medical records.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Do things get lost? Yeah, that's why I mentioned having copies.
Yeah,
Don't ever assume, because we know.
and the putting on the refrigerator thing, all the guys that run on the squad know that that's where that information is. That's what you're saying. I don't know what little thing you're talking about. I've heard of them. Yeah, but it probably wouldn't all fit in a little. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, I mean, it would have, you know, like that.
I go to a lot of senior housing, a lot of independent living, assisted living. They have a tube with a magnet that is on their fridge. It's all rolled up in a tube and all that information together. And like she said, EMS knows one of the first places you look is the
Sort of like one
refrigerator.
of those things that you put the money to the bench. You
It
go up,
doesn't have to be that big, but
You can even just put the form myself on.
Yeah.
Right on the fridge.
tape it all on the fridge or put it with a magnet and
get one of those, you know, sleeve protector
Yep,
things that are
yep.
everything up.
that's perfect. I've seen a lot of people use those too. Yep. Where do you get such a tube? You can just put it in a plastic sleeve and put it on a magnet on your refrigerator, but to have all that information in the refrigerator is one of the best things you can do for yourself and whoever's gonna be providing, emergency medical.
I have a question. Once you, I had an experience, and this is probably 25 years ago, where a woman that I knew had a stroke. There was really no chance that she was gonna recover it. We've actually known two situations like this, but they did a feeding tube and all that stuff. And once they started that, this is back then, once they started the feeding, they could not, the family, no matter what the family did, they would not let that take her off like that. And the one woman lived for literally a year. Just in,
I'm gonna mention a name, Terry Shivo, perfect example
Right,
of something like that.
is that still a thing, like once they
It
started?
can be.
Okay.
It can be based on a couple of factors. Number one, which hospital you're in. If you're in a Christian-based hospital, it's a little bit more difficult than a non-Christian-based hospital. And number two, who the healthcare team is. And the third thing is who's resisting the decision to remove that. So there's different. I was the chair of a hospital's medical ethics committee for 15 years, and I've gone through every single scenario, and I've had that
And
situation.
it's heartbreaking.
It's very heartbreaking.
I mean, that person.
And we don't know if we're gonna stroke, we don't know if we're gonna have a heart attack, but we do know that we have the opportunity to be proactive as opposed to reactive in getting our documents in place.
I didn't know that.
Scheduled in my calendar.
I didn't know that was still, like you said, just a
It
time.
can be, it can be. We live in a very litigious society, so that's why I say, you know, a lot of factors weigh in. Thank you, everybody.
Let me go ahead and
Hey.
ask the people online. Yes, go ahead. If you have a question online,
I do.
Sure.
This is Rita. If you have no directives written at all, and you're in a situation where there's a doctor there, do they sometimes play a bigger role in making the decision than the family, or they just give advice, or how does that happen?
I would say it'd be more of the latter, giving advice. So the physician is not going to make the decision for you. Nor should they be making the decision for you. But they would be presenting the options to the family. If there's no directives, no code status, of course, they're going to, in the immediate, circumstance, they're going to do everything they can to stabilize you and save your life. But then when it comes to kind of those more advanced discussions, it's still completely up to the family, but it kind of goes more in the, the pecking order that Tony mentioned. It would be that person or those people's decision to make, and they could take, the physician's advice, but the physician would be more presenting options.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna add one last take-home message. Don't wait for your primary care physician to have this conversation with you. Be the person that's proactive and start the conversation with them and say, this is something I want to talk about. And they will be very relieved so that they can better assist you with what type of care you want moving forward in your life.
You keep mentioning primary care physician. My primary care provider is a nurse practitioner.
Okay,
Is that
absolutely. It's perfectly fine.
perfectly fine? Okay.
Anybody who's providing your primary care, if it's a nurse practitioner or a family physician, internal med, whatever you might go. Yep. Thanks for clarifying that.
Another question. Usually if you're in serious condition like that, your primary care is not on the scene at all with the hospitalists and all that stuff anymore. So how does it benefit you to, except for the advice of your physician in making the directive?
Yeah, so I would say it depends. Sometimes maybe in a lot of cases, there are still involved. A lot of primary care physicians do still go into the hospital. I agree with you, though, it's becoming less common. However, it's very common in the hospital that somebody's primary care physician will be called by the physician that's taking care of you and the team. So that communication between healthcare professionals happens a lot more, I think, than people realize. Because your primary care physician or whoever's taking care of you maybe knows you for the last, 50 years or more. So that actually does happen quite a bit. So I still would say, even if they're not going to be involved in your hospital care, I probably still have the conversation with them.
Okay, thank you.
What happens if you get transferred, like you went to Wood County and they had all your stuff, but they transfer you to St. D?
Paperwork should go with you, always does. That's standard protocol. Yep.
All right.
That was my question.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, appreciate you having us.
I would just like to say it's important.